In Spanish, when you're talking about something in the past, it's necessary to decide between the preterite and the imperfect. Let's look at the uses of the preterite. The preterite corresponds to completed events and actions in the past. Action was taken and completed. You can visualize the beginning and the end of an action. It describes what happened, what occurred on one particular occasion or a specific number of occasions, and describes specific actions that occurred at a specific point in time and were completed. Use number 1 of the preterite. Simple, isolated actions. I bought my first car after graduating. It's an isolated event. Happened one time. Last summer, we went to Costa del Sol. It's a vacation that we took, a trip that we took one time. We also use the preterite for actions that were repeated a specific number of times or within a specific window of time. I lived in Arizona for 18 years. 18 years is a specific window of time. Therefore, we use the preterite of vivir. Escribí a mis amigos todos los días por 2 años. I wrote to my friends every day for 2 years. 2 years is a specific window of time. Therefore, we use the preterite of escribir. We also use the preterite for main actions and events. For example, fuimos a la piscina ayer. We went to the pool yesterday. It's the main action or event of the sentence. It happened yesterday, one particular occasion. We also use the preterite for a series of completed actions. Anna slipped, fell, and sprained her ankle. That corresponds to a series of completed actions. The preterite also has specific words or expressions that trigger its use most of the time. El domingo, on Sunday, one particular Sunday. Last Saturday, last weekend. They all do the same thing. They refer to one particular day and most likely lead up to events that occurred on that day, specific events. Again, these are expressions that refer to one particular day. That is the common thread here. These expressions are ways to refer to one particular day or date, and therefore most likely specific things that occurred on that day or date. Once, for the first time, 2 times, all specific. Suddenly usually triggers the preterite as well because it leads up to events and actions that occurred all of the sudden. These expressions are ways to summarize how something turned out or what happened in the end. Therefore, they typically trigger the preterite. It's important to point out that these expressions most of the time trigger the preterite, but not always. There are exceptions. But usually we use the preterite with them because they refer to specific isolated events. The imperfect is the past tense we use in Spanish to describe and generalize about the past. For example, actions in progress, actions that were habitual in the past. They're not completed. They're in progress or they happened regularly, therefore not a specific number of times. And we use the imperfect to correspond to those verbs. We also use the imperfect to describe about the past, what was going on, what was happening, setting up background, or what used to be. For habitual actions that were repeated an unspecific number of times, or to talk about childhood, typically we use the imperfect. When Paco and Ana were a couple, they used to write to each other every day. Todos los días indicates that this was a habitual action, and we use the imperfect of escribir. When I was a child, my family and I lived in the country. We don't specify how long the family lived in the country. Therefore, it's a description. We also use the imperfect for background information and circumstances of a main action. Background information such as time and weather, age in the past, a description of someone's appearance, feelings, beliefs, and emotional states, and other things that were happening. Here are some examples. It was 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and it was hot when the accident occurred. 2 o'clock in the afternoon is time. It was hot weather. We need the imperfect for both of those verbs. For that reason, we're describing. When she was 21, Elena was my friend and she wanted to help everyone. Again, age. She was my friend is a description, not an action, so we need the imperfect. Quería, she wanted, that's an emotional state, a mental state, not an action, imperfect. The thief was tall, description, imperfect of ser. He was 30 years old, age, imperfect of tener. He was wearing a hat and sunglasses, a description of his appearance, imperfect. The imperfect also has specific expressions that trigger its use most of the time. On Sundays, we're generalizing. On Saturday nights, on weekends. These expressions would all refer to habitual, regular actions that occurred on a regular basis. To represent that, we use the imperfect. The imperfect is about generalizing about the past, each day, every day, ways to do that. All of these expressions have that in common. They refer to habits in the past or their ways to generalize about the past. Always, often, rarely, again, ways to refer to actions that occurred an unspecified number of times. Therefore, they trigger the imperfect. What all of these expressions have in common is that they're ways to make generalizations about the past. Therefore, they reference habitual actions or make generalizations about the past. Mientras, while, is a way to connect two actions in progress. ing in the past corresponds to the imperfect. There you have it in a nutshell. We use the preterite to talk about actions that occurred one time or a specific number of times in the past. An action verb in the imperfect represents an action in progress, ing in the past, or a habitual action, what someone used to do, a regular past action. If you're using a verb in the past that does not correspond to an action, it may be likely that you need the imperfect because you're making a description about the past.